Hey guys, welcome back to another video. It's me, Greg, and this week I'm here to talk to you about learning Swedish. So you might have seen a couple of weeks ago I uploaded a video right here on this channel speaking Swedish after living here in Sweden for 2 years now, and lots of you have been flooding my comments on social medias asking for tips and tricks that I use, the resources that helped me to learn the language, whether I found it easy or hard, and I thought why not condense that all down into one video for you today to help answer some of those questions and help those of you also looking to learn the language. So this video is a summary of 5 of the things that I found really helpful when it comes to practicing and learning Swedish, both before I moved here and since I've been here. I'd love to know in the comments below afterwards if you agree, if you've used any of these resources before. Just let me know what you think. Okay, so in no particular order, one place I've got to start is Radio Sweden på svenska. Now, if you don't know what I'm talking about, it's a daily newscast that comes out from the national radio broadcaster here in Sweden, 10 to 15 minutes every single day, the headlines read and narrated in easy Swedish. Now, I really recommend this daily newscast because it's only 10 to 15 minutes long, and it's a really good thing to get into the routine of listening to. I used to, even when I was in London, when I was commuting to work, listen to the podcast every morning, just so that I could get my headlines, get a bit of news, and get a bit of practice of Swedish in. And it's great even if you're new to the language, if you've not been learning for very long, because they take it very, very simply, very easily, very basic words. And of course, the benefit is, even if you don't understand everything, you can get the context, because it's probably talking about some sort of headline or world event that you've heard on your own news or in your own country already. So even if you don't understand every single word, you'll probably still pick up what's going on. As I say, just a really, really good place to start, a really good habit to get into, and a really good way to just make sure that you're picking up the ability to listen to Swedish as much as talk it. Number 2 follows along a similar trend, and it's listening to Swedish podcasts. Now, I'm not going to lie, this was a tip that somebody gave me a little while ago, and I kind of shied away from for a while, because I always thought it'd be easier to watch something and see something moving, so at least if I didn't understand every word, I could get the context instead. But I'm here today to tell you to learn from my mistake and make sure that you get listening to podcasts as soon as you possibly can, because it just gets you into the routine of listening to the language, hearing the tempo, hearing the way people speak, and it's a really good way to get used to some of the accents. And these days we're so privileged that there's so many different types of podcasts out there for all different interests, so you can basically choose something related to one of your hobbies or one of your big interests and just follow along that way. For me personally, I'm big into music, so something that I found really useful was one of the national radio stations, P3 here in Sweden, does a musikdokumentär, so a music documentary series where they follow different artists and they talk about their journey to fame and their biggest songs and big moments in their lives and things like that. Again, a bit like på svenska, it's a really good resource because even if you don't understand every single word, maybe they've got interview parts that are done in English, or maybe they've got some kind of context that you can hang on to because you know a little bit about the subject already. So again, it's a really comfortable, familiar way to get used to hearing the language and to get really immersed into the environment of listening to it often. The third thing that I've mentioned to you guys today is to make sure that you're watching Swedish TV. Now, the easiest place to get started is of course Netflix. There's so much content on there as it is. There's lots of different Swedish content that you can filter by, and the best thing that I would suggest to do is when you get yourself on there, you can load up the subtitles in your own native language, and then you can follow along while you're listening to the Swedish in the background. That way you can follow the story, but at the same time you're getting used to hearing the language, seeing it in action, seeing how everything goes together. And it's a really kind of unconscious way of training because you don't really see that you're putting in any effort. You're kind of just enjoying a TV show, but at the same time you're actually learning the language. And then as you get more comfortable with the language, you can switch the subtitles out for Swedish ones instead, and then of course you get used to seeing the language, seeing how the words are spelled as well, which is a really useful tool once you're a little bit more familiar, so that you can kind of listen to what they're saying and then try and pick up the words and the spelling, and it's just a really good way of training, I would say. If you're looking for my recommendation, somewhere I'd suggest you start on Netflix is Störst av allt. It's also called Quicksand in English. It's a really good show, really, really good way to get used to the language, and it's just such a gripping drama series that actually it doesn't really matter if you don't pick up every single word. There is of course the book as well if you're a little bit more advanced with your language, but I will admit it took me a bit longer to get through that, so start with the TV series. Number 4 is something that a Swedish teacher back in London taught me before I moved out here. Really, really good idea is to check out easy Swedish news in written form. One website that I used was called 8 sidor, so the number 8 and then sidor. I'll leave the link down below. And there you can find some of the headlines both from Sweden and from the world in very, very easy Swedish. And you can even have it narrated to you if you want to as well. Again, a really good routine to get get used to in the beginning because you can read through the latest headlines, you've got some context, you know what's going on in the world, you've read it in your own news, now you can read it in Swedish and you can kind of dissect and try and pick out some of the words as well. Something I did early on was when I had the time, I would print out the articles and try and highlight and underline things where I found new words. But even if you don't have the time for that, you're commuting to work maybe, just flip open your phone, read through some headlines, see how you get through. I really would say don't underestimate any type of technique like that where you can really kind of immerse yourself in the language as part of your daily routine, because if you get into these habits, it's a really good way of picking things up unconsciously. And then my final recommendation is to get yourself immersed in some Swedish books. And no, I'm not talking about the kind of novels that you'd be reading as a young adult living in Sweden. I'm talking start simple. Yep, just like I heard before I moved to Sweden, you've probably heard that a good place to start is children's books. But it feels like quite a hard subject to grasp because you're thinking, well, I read those books, 15, 20 years ago. Will it really be fun and interesting to read it now? And my answer would be, don't start with the classic children's books because you'll find that maybe that's a little bit too basic or a little bit too boring or slow for you to follow. You want to go for something that's maybe aimed for somewhere between 8 and 12 years old. And yeah, I never thought I'd be reading a book for a 12-year-old again, but it really does help. It's a really good way to get used to reading the language, to get used to following a story, picking up some context. You can stop in between and translate words if you're unsure. But again, I would encourage you not to translate every single word. My general rule is if you see a word that comes up 3 or 4 times on the same page that you don't know, then it's worth translating. But if it just comes up once and you're not really sure and it doesn't seem kind of vital to the sentence, just leave it and move on. It's probably better that you just understand the context. And if you want my recommendations of where to start, I would use this book, An Havet. I found it really, really useful, really easy to follow, really gripping to read, or as much as it can be for a 12-year-old, but a good book to start with. Okay, so that's my tips and tricks for getting used to hearing, listening, practicing and using your Swedish. I'd love to know what you think. Have you heard of any of these resources before? Have you used any of them before? Or will you maybe start now? Anyway, guys, I hope this has been useful for you. And if you want some more tips and life hacks in the future, let me know and I can, of course, put something together. But as I say, I hope this is somewhere to start on getting you used to hearing Swedish in your daily life. And I hope you see that your language journey begins to skyrocket even faster as a result of using some of these hacks. All right, well, that's all we've got time for today. Thanks again for coming by. Make sure you like down below and, of course, subscribe if you haven't already. Turn on that notification bell so that you know exactly when I put out a new video. It's great to have you along for this journey. Thank you to everyone that's come already. And yeah, looking forward to sharing more videos with you very, very soon. Hope you have a great day and I'll speak to you again later. Bye, guys.